All right, so this last week and a half or so has been absolutely nonstop when it comes to new Nintendo Switch 2 leaks, reports, rumors, mainly coming out of accessory manufacturers, just straight up posting the images of what they will be selling for Nintendo's next-gen console, and some of them even already taking pre-orders for said accessories. But the big thing that many fans want to know, including myself, is while it's cool to get a look at the system and what it might look like from a hardware perspective, when is Nintendo actually going to communicate what they're doing with this system? Meaning that first look trailer, that big October 2016 first look at the Nintendo Switch type trailer, but for the Switch 2. When is that day going to be upon us? And while the safe answer, if you just want to have your expectations set to a bare minimum, we know Nintendo's going to reveal it before March 31st, 2025. However, there is now numerous sources appearing online saying that they are hearing industry chatter from one source and specifically major third-party devs from other sources that a January reveal is actually what is on the table planned as of right now for this console hardware from Nintendo. Now, what is maybe equally exciting to the new Nintendo Switch 2 reveal time reports that are appearing is actually some claims that there's a ton of third-party support in the pipeline, and a lot of different games from major studios are essentially just sitting and waiting to port their games to the next generation Nintendo console, and we should safely be able to expect some banger third-party titles that have been absolutely killing it on other platforms come to Nintendo's hardware finally. So we're gonna get on the same page with all of this new info. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first start off this conversation with focusing on the January reveal timeline side of things. I do think it's a safe bet just logically. I think by the end of January, we will for sure probably know about the hardware no later than February 4th, because that is Nintendo's next investor briefing. And while a lot of people online will want to say, well, Nintendo doesn't really care about investors and letting them know any new info on their next gen hardware, that's clearly not what they're doing this time around, because the confirmation that the Nintendo Switch 2 would be officially announced before the end of the fiscal year came literally the day of an investors briefing, and then the next update we got on the console came at the most recent one, which was the confirmation that backwards compatibility and Nintendo Switch Online is rolling forward. So if you don't think Nintendo cares about what investors are thinking with their console launch strategy, you're wrong about that. And I do think that by February 4th, they're not going to want to just answer the questions about what and when they might reveal the console, but rather, we've revealed it, here's our plan to bring it to market and make it successful at its launch. So with that in mind, Christopher Dring, who is from gamesindustry.biz, although I believe he just recently retired or is retiring very soon, somebody very well established within the industry, known for leaking a lot of different things, although I will call it what it is. His track record with Nintendo information has not been necessarily the greatest, let's say. But when you talk about somebody who clearly has numerous third-party developer contacts, this is somebody very well respected, regarded within the industry, and would have these contacts. And so I do think what they say holds some weight. And you can hear this following clip directly from the gamesindustry.biz podcast, where Chris has this to say about the reveal time.
I'm not surprised Nintendo, when they're obviously like, you know, they're keeping their cards close to their chest, you know, until they can do the big Switch reveal, which surely, if we're looking at a Q2, has got to be early next year. And I mean, it's chatter. I want to stress things chatter before Nintendo everything or whatever it's called starts reporting my comments as fact. It's just chatter from other people. They think it's, I'm told, may even be right as the new year starts, which is great for someone who may have just left their job in the media. We might be getting a sort of Switch to reveal, or at least something. So that's exciting.
So if true, this is definitely the most exciting out of any other reveal time rumor, because the suggestion here is that New Year's time, maybe not New Year's Day, but like the day after or just right at the start of the new year, not even talking about getting into January towards like the midpoint or the end of the month like I am more expecting, but rather Chris Dring is just saying the industry chatter that he is hearing suggests that it's like a New Year's kickoff for Nintendo announcing their next gen hardware, or at least something in relation to that Switch 2 hardware, is what he's hearing from third-party devs and connections within the industry. So it's a possibility, and it is something that I would love to have happen, but I'm not setting all of my hopes, dreams, and expectations on that by any means. Again, worst case scenario, we only have to wait till March 31st, 2025, so it's not that big of a deal either way, but it is exciting for the prospect of a early January reveal, which might, lead a little bit more credence into that earlier launch timeline idea. I'm still setting my my expectations more towards a May or June launch time. But would Nintendo do something real crazy where they just reveal it in literally super early January and launch it in late March and consider that a long enough reveal to release timeline and enough time to market all their games? Maybe. But a couple other sources also chiming in on this third-party developer talk about something happening in January. You have fellow content creator Nintendo Talk, where he says, source, Nintendo to reveal Nintendo Switch 2 in January. This is coming from a major third-party developer contact I have. Here's what they have to say about the console. Get ready to play modern AAA offerings on your Nintendo system in 2025. Friend of the channel, Nintendo Prime, also backed this up, where he says, I can corroborate that January is what I have also been told, and based on what I know, AAA offerings on Switch 2 are going to be absolutely insane. Video on the incoming January stuff in a bit. So when multiple sources come out like this and are all kind of hearing similar things, Chris Dring being the only one that's hearing that New Year's kickoff thing, if you want to read into it a little bit, Nintendo's presence at the Game Awards was once again just some splash trailers or sizzle trailers, I guess you call them, about their games, but they were, they did highlight a very specific thing that said, thank you for joining us now and into the future, kind of Nintendo in their own way, making like a minor poke or tease at the fact that they have stuff right around the corner and very soon for us, but that is not here yet. All the Game Awards trailers that we saw that didn't have Switch 2 logos at the end of any of them, or just a Nintendo logo, we know a lot of those games that we saw revealed there will be headed to next gen hardware, and that's very exciting from a third party standpoint. The more game content that you have on a platform, the better, obviously. This New Year's kickoff idea is really a cool one, and one that I would love to see happen. But even if it is towards the end of the month, that's still very much in line with what Nate the Hate has been expecting, as well as his expectation, and it matches mine, is just that Nintendo will reveal it before their next February investors briefing, which, as we talked about, is February 4th. So exciting possibilities around the reveal time for the hardware, but what do we really care about when we actually get the hardware in our hands? It is the games we have available to play with them. And funnily enough, off of that Nintendo Talk tweet that we talked about earlier, Samus Hunter, who is somebody who I'm not entirely sold on by any stretch of the imagination. They've had a really sketchy track history far back in the past, but so far in 2024, every single piece of information that they've put out teasing some kind of announcement Nintendo related has come to pass flawlessly this year. So 3 out of 4 things they've put out there so far have already happened, and there's a Silk Song tease that has not shown up yet. They actually said in their post that it might be a little bit early to be talking about that. There is talk of a Microsoft presentation in January, and that's actually kind of where I'm thinking we might see it show up. But they had this to say in response to Nintendo Talk's tweet: third-party studios have been waiting for the new generation to be able to release their games on Nintendo, and I'm not just talking about porting from the PS4, but also current generation. Think of BioWare, From Software, or CD Projekt, but also Japanese studios like Namco and Atlas. So BioWare, the game that pops into mind is Dragon Age: The Veilguard. I haven't looked into it too much. I've seen some interesting takes online about the game. Don't really know too much about the gameplay loop or anything like that, but hey, an additional game on the Switch 2, I'm perfectly fine with it. CD Projekt Red, obviously Cyberpunk 2077 would be a perfect candidate to be brought over to Switch 2, and now that it's had ample time to get all the updates it's needed, it's not a broken game anymore like it was at launch. Fortunately, it's actually done really well in sales over the course of the long haul of the game as well, because the anime helped bring it back, and then they actually had a really content complete game that worked right towards the end of all the updates that they provided to it. And you know what, Nintendo Switch 2 is going to get that version day and date, which is also very exciting. Atlas, obviously the missing Persona 3 Reload that is on other consoles and not on Switch, and then also Metaphor being a shoe-in obvious pick. And the big one for me personally is absolutely FromSoft, because while there's some rumors and backroom talk that maybe they're going to get bought out by Sony, which I absolutely hope doesn't happen, I am all for Elden Ring being a day one launch game on Switch 2, and I also think that it makes a ton of sense to bring over Dark Souls 2 and 3 at some point in time. And then we got the confirmation at the Game Awards that Elden Ring Night Rain is a thing, and it's like a 3-person co-op action survival roguelite type of experience, which sounds really crazy and out of left field for FromSoft. Not Miyazaki directing this time, but rather somebody taking the reins for the first time that's worked under him for quite a while. But the gameplay clips that we saw looked absolutely fantastic. fantastic for that title. And I did notice at the end of the trailer that PS4 and Xbox One, not saying that only PS4 and Xbox One games will come to Switch 2, but those systems are supported, which does make it that much more of a shoe-in type of port to Nintendo's new hardware, as it will be able to run those no problem. And you also have to kind of remember that the Series S being a thing really helps out the conversation with a lot of different Nintendo Switch 2 ports, because there are going to be plenty of current gen games that you might think will struggle on Nintendo's next gen hardware, but this is going to have more RAM internally than even what the Xbox Series S does. And with the extra under the hood tricks that they can pull off with things like DLSS built in natively, I think that Nintendo is going to be in a really good position to run the current generation of games and the prior gen games, albeit with maybe some sacrifices compared to your PS5 and Xbox Series X counterparts. But very exciting prospects here. January reveal and a ton of third-party game support is what is being proposed here. So let me know in the comments down below if you're excited for any of this. Do you have any more hope or expectation that it will indeed be revealed in January? Do you think that games like Elden Ring, Cyberpunk 2077, and even Dragon Age are in the conversation for maybe launch window type titles? And what other games that I didn't mention would you most like to see brought to Nintendo's next gen consoles? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.